Wow. Oh, this is a bidding. 에너지 들어가 있어요. 우와.
맛봐도 돼요? 와우. 와, 색깔이 조금 노란색이에요. 부드러워요. You see? Beautiful little octopus shape. Yes. Perfect. 싹.
In our headlines on this Monday, May 18th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump speak on the phone for about half an hour late Sunday to touch upon the latter's recent trip to China and to reaffirm bilateral ties. Also here in South Korea, a ceremony to commemorate the sacrifice of those in the city of Gwangju 46 years ago as they sought to uphold democracy. Meanwhile, Samsung Electronics and its labor union resume a fresh round of government-mediated negotiations on bonuses and wages today, ahead of a strike scheduled to begin on Thursday. President Lee Jae-myung and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump were on the phone for about half an hour this past weekend to touch upon the latter's recent trip to China and to reaffirm bilateral ties. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
In a call made after the U.S. China summit, President Lee Jae-myung was briefed by U.S. President Donald Trump on the results of that high-stakes meeting. Their talks over the phone on Sunday night, Korea time, took about half an hour. In a Blue House readout, President Lee congratulated his U.S. counterpart for successfully concluding his first state visit to Beijing in about 9 years. He noted the importance of managing the U.S.-China relationship in a stable manner for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. Trump shared the results of his recent summit with China's Xi Jinping, ranging from Washington-Beijing relations, agreements on the trade front, as well as the situation on the Korean Peninsula and in the Middle East. Yi took note of their dialogue related to the Korean Peninsula, and Trump promised his role and contribution for regional peace and stability in close coordination with his South Korean counterpart. Shortly after the talks, the South Korean president wrote on his social media that they share the understanding that close communication and coordination between Seoul and Washington is more important than ever amid a rapidly changing global order. The two leaders also agreed to faithfully carry out the Allies' joint fact sheet announced last year, once again calling the agreement historic. The fact sheet stipulates Korea's commitment to U.S. investments for lower tariffs and close cooperation on South Korea building a nuclear-powered submarine. On the Middle East, President Yi assessed President Trump's leadership in resolving the issue and wished that peace and stability would be swiftly restored in the region. It was the first top-level interaction between Seoul and Washington since the leaders' meeting in Gwangju about 7 months ago. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And upon his return home from China, Donald Trump has resumed his pressure campaign against Iran, fueling fears about the prospects of renewed military aggression in the Middle East. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump has put further pressure on Iran to come up with a ceasefire proposal that could be accepted. Writing in a Truth Social post on Sunday, Trump said that the clock is ticking for Iran, adding that they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Trump reportedly plans to convene his security advisors at the White House on Monday to discuss whether to resume military options as well. In an interview with the online media outlet Axios, Trump repeated that Iran was running out of time and that if it did not bring a better proposal to the negotiating table, the U.S. would attack more forcefully than before. The warnings follow a phone call between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where they reportedly discussed the possibility of resuming attacks on Iran. According to reports citing Iranian state television, the phone call lasted more than 30 minutes and ended shortly before the start of a meeting of Israel's security cabinet. Citing two anonymous Middle Eastern officials, the New York Times said that the U.S. and Israel have entered an intensive state of readiness with renewed attacks in mind. Meanwhile, with Trump voicing impatience at the deadlock, the Korea-built Baraka nuclear plant in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, caught fire on Sunday after being struck by a drone. The fire was on a generator located just outside the nuclear plant and caused no injuries or radiation alerts, with officials saying that all core systems at the nuclear plant are operating normally. The South Korean Foreign Ministry and Korea Electric Power Corporation also said there were no injuries to South Korean workers at the plant. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung will host Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at his hometown of Andong tomorrow, that is Tuesday, for yet another summit session aimed at advancing practical partnership. Our political correspondent Moon Hye-ryun reports.
It will be the third time the two leaders have sat down together, and the agenda is wide-ranging. The meeting is the latest in a series of reciprocal visits the two sides have been building since they first met on the sidelines of last October's APEC summit in Gwangju, where they agreed to pursue regular high-level diplomacy. According to presidential chief spokesperson Kang Yoo-jung, the two leaders are expected to discuss practical cooperation across the economy, social issues, and the protection of their citizens abroad, with regional security and the situation in the Middle East also on the table. Analysts say the summit is less about any single headline agenda and more about sustaining the momentum the two sides have already built.
Rather than being driven by one specific agenda, I think this meeting is about continuing to stabilize the relationship. And within that, issues like energy security and supply chain resilience could come up as areas where the two countries find it relatively easy to cooperate.
The two leaders last met in January when President Lee visited Nara, Prime Minister Takaichi's home prefecture, for their second bilateral summit. President Lee said the two sides agreed to deepen cooperation on economic security, science and technology, and international norms, and to continue working-level talks on artificial intelligence and intellectual property. Perhaps most notably, the two leaders addressed a long-standing historical issue, agreeing to pursue DNA identification of the remains of forcibly mobilized Koreans and Japanese who died in the 1942 Jose coal mine flooding in Japan, which President Lee called a small but meaningful step forward. But beyond the agenda, much of the attention surrounding Tuesday's summit is on where it is being held. Andong is President Lee's hometown, and as this marks the first time the leaders of the two countries have exchanged visits to each other's hometowns, the Blue House described it as a meaningful opportunity to deepen the bond of trust between them. For Andong, long regarded as the spiritual heartland of Korean traditional culture, the summit also carries local significance, with residents drawing comparisons to Queen Elizabeth II's visit in 1999, which brought a lasting boost in tourism. 문혜련, Arirang News.
On the local political front, the president has pledged to preserve the spirit of the sacrifice of those in Gwangju 46 years ago in upholding South Korea's democracy. Our Cho Young-eun files this report.
President Lee Jae-myung on Monday attended the 46th commemoration ceremony of the May 18 pro-democratization movement in Gwangju and delivered an address.
민주주의를 위해 기꺼이 자신을 내던졌던 5월 민주 영령들의 고귀한 넋 앞에 머리 숙여 무한한 존경과 깊은 애도의 마음을 표합니다.
The ceremony took place at the former Jeollanam-do Provincial Government Building, which served as a final stronghold of civic resistance during the movement following its restoration. Earlier, President Lee and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung also visited the May 18 National Cemetery to pay tribute to the victims of the movement and their bereaved families. The spirit of May 18 was also highlighted when making reference to the events of December 3, 2024.
12월 3일 내라는 아직 끝나지 않은 5월의 질문이었습니다. 저절로 오는 민주주의도 저절로 지켜지는 민주주의도 없습니다.
The government also pledged to continue efforts to document and honor the May 18 democratization movement so that the Gwangju of 1980 can continue to safeguard the nation's future. Also stressed in Lee's speech was the need for bipartisan support to ensure that the spirit of May 18 is reflected in the preamble of the nation's constitution.
정치적 이해관계를 초월한 모든 정치권의 지속적인 국민과의 약속이었던 것만큼 여야의 초당적 협력과 결단을 간곡하게 요청드립니다.
President Lee also pledged to rebuild the former Jeollanam-do Provincial Government Building into a living K-democracy shrine. He further announced plans to establish a government-led system to register and honor those who contributed to the May 18 democratization movement. Amid multiple crises facing South Korea today, from slowing growth and deepening inequality to shifts in the global order and regional depopulation, the South Korean leader voiced hope for his country to move forward, following the values embodied by Gwangju. Cho Young-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's first annual document detailing its North Korea policy under the Lee Jae-myung administration places priority on peaceful coexistence. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young explains.
Peaceful relations first, before denuclearization or unification on the Korean peninsula. That's the message running through Seoul's new unification white paper, the first under the Lee Jae-myung administration. Released on Monday, the annual document lays out Seoul's policy for peaceful coexistence with North Korea. It appears to respond to Pyongyang's hostile two-states policy, stressing the need to move towards a, quote, peaceful two-state relations geared towards unification.
Since Yi took office, Seoul has suspended and dismantled loudspeaker broadcasts and halted anti-North radio transmissions and leaflet campaigns. Since then, the North stopped sending trash-filled balloons. At least, compared with before, inter-Korean tensions have eased.
The document cites how President Lee last August pledged to respect the North Korean regime, to not pursue unification that subjugates the North, and to not commit any hostile acts. Alongside exchanges and normalization of relations with the North, denuclearization is still a goal under the END initiative. However, the white paper admits the nuclear issue cannot be resolved quickly.
The previous Yoon Suk-yeol government clearly defined the North as an enemy, and its audacious initiative demanded denuclearization first. The Yi administration too seeks denuclearization, but not as a precondition for dialogue. It first aims to lower tensions and seeks dialogue, peaceful coexistence, and shared development.
Without an elaborate focus on unification, the white paper sets out ways to institutionalize peaceful ties, calling to restore inter-Korean contact channels, resume dialogue, and reduce military tensions. It also proposes a new inter-Korean basic agreement as a more durable framework. But experts say a more elaborate approach is needed to engage Pyongyang, which is still refusing contact with Seoul.
With its nuclear arsenal expanding rapidly, denuclearization looks increasingly unrealistic. The priority should be a nuclear freeze, followed by sanctions relief and steps to normalize the North's ties with the U.S. and Japan. Pyongyang must sense real benefits from cooperation with Seoul if it's to return to talks.
The ministry revealed earlier this month that North Korea revised its constitution to reflect its policy of distinguishing South Korea as a separate hostile state, removing symbolic references to unification. However, Seoul officials have noted that the North hasn't significantly sharpened rhetoric against the South. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And for the first time in 8 years, a North Korean sports team is here in South Korea for a regional women's football tournament. Our culture correspondent Park Gwangju covers their arrival at the airport this past Sunday and more.
Greeted by the sound of camera shutters at Incheon International Airport on Sunday, North Korean football club Daeguang FC arrived in South Korea on a flight from Beijing, ahead of its AFC Women's Champions League semifinal clash against Suwon FC Women on Wednesday at Suwon Sports Complex. 39 North Koreans, including 27 players and sporting director Hyun Cho-ryun, walked through a crowd of about 100 reporters and security personnel. South Korea's unification ministry approved the delegation's week-long visit through May 24th, the day after the competition's final match, which is also taking place at Suwon Sports Complex. And it promised support for a successful event.
We'll cooperate with related organizations, including the AFC and the Korea Football Association, to ensure the competition is carried out safely and smoothly, in line with the spirit of an international sporting event.
The visit marks the first time that a North Korean sports team has traveled to the South for an international competition since the 2018 International Table Tennis Federation World Tour Grand Finals. On Sunday, civic and religious groups supporting inter-Korean exchange also gathered at the airport to welcome the team.
With the North Korea defectors in our church community, we came here together, hoping to meet the North Korean people. We hope sports exchanges like this can help ease tensions and open a path toward reconciliation between the two Koreas. We also plan to attend Wednesday's match as well.
Despite the warm reception, the North Koreans moved quickly through the terminal without interacting with anyone at the airport, nor did they respond to questions from reporters. After loading their luggage into the team bus, the delegation immediately departed for its hotel in Suwon. Founded in 2012 and based in Pyongyang, Daeguang FC is backed by the North Korean consumer goods company Daeguang and is considered one of the North's top women's football teams, having won multiple domestic league titles. Daeguang FC from North Korea, now in the South, will now focus on preparing for Wednesday's semifinal against Suwon FC Women of South Korea. All eyes are on which team will advance to the final this Saturday. Park Gwangju, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics and its labor union resume a fresh round of government-mediated negotiations today amid hopes to avoid a costly walkout set to begin later this week. Our economics correspondent Kim Jun-hong reports.
Samsung Electronics and its labor union are engaged in last-minute negotiations over performance bonuses, with only days remaining before a planned strike. Monday's talks, led by the National Labor Relations Commission, come after negotiations collapsed about a week earlier. Following the latest mediation session, Commission Chair Park Soo-gun said the talks would continue until Tuesday. The union is calling for Samsung to formally guarantee a bonus pool equivalent to 15% of operating profit under its OPI, or Overall Performance Incentive System. It also wants the removal of the current cap that limits bonuses to 50% of an employee's annual salary. Management, meanwhile, insists on maintaining the current bonus calculation system and says it cannot accept eliminating the bonus ceiling. The company added that industry-leading compensation could be offered through special incentives if Samsung secures the top spot in the industry. Even the company's chair, Lee Jae-yong, stepped in on Saturday, delivering a public apology and appeal for unity. The strike is set to begin Thursday, with the union warning the walkout could last for up to 18 days. However, the planned full-scale strike has effectively faced a setback after a court on Monday largely accepted Samsung Electronics' request for an injunction requiring staffing levels at key facilities to remain at normal levels during any industrial action. The government has also hinted at possible emergency mediation, with Prime Minister Kim Min-seok saying Sunday that all available measures would be considered to protect the country's economy. Under current law, the labor minister can suspend strike action for up to 30 days if a walkout is deemed likely to cause serious economic damage. Meanwhile, 3 days ahead of the planned strike, President Lee Jae-myung wrote on social media that labor should be respected as much as businesses and management rights should be respected just as much as labor rights. He stressed that such a balance is essential under Korea's liberal democratic order and capitalist market economy. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
In other news now, applications for the second round of financial assistance to alleviate the burden of soaring fuel prices kicked off on this Monday. Our Cha Yun-kyung has details.
The South Korean government will begin accepting the second round of applications for its fuel price relief fund starting Monday. According to the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, applications opened at 9 a.m. and will continue through July 3rd. During the first week, a rotation system will be applied based on the last digit of the applicant's birth year. Those who didn't apply during the first round will also be able to submit applications during this period. The support program targets around 36 million people in the bottom 70% income bracket. Eligibility is based on household health insurance premium payments assessed in March of this year. For example, a single-person household with workplace insurance can qualify if the monthly premiums are 130,000 won or about $95 or less. That is equivalent to an annual income of roughly 43 million won or around $31,000. However, so-called high net worth individuals with taxable property assets exceeding 1.2 billion won, about $870,000 or annual financial income from interest or dividends surpassing 20 million won or roughly $14,500 are excluded. Special rules were also introduced to ensure dual-income households are not unfairly left out.
For a single home owner, the assessed property value is around 2.6 billion won. Financially assuming a 2% dividend yield, a 1 billion won investment is required.
The amount of support varies by region. Residents in the Seoul metropolitan area will receive 100,000 won, or about $73, while people who live outside the capital region will receive 150,000 won, or around $109. People in designated population decline areas and special support regions will receive up to 250,000 won, or roughly $182. Funds can be received via credit or debit cards, local gift certificates, or prepaid cards. The money must be used by August 31st at small businesses and affiliated stores within the applicant's local government area. Unused balances will expire after the deadline. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
The Culture Ministry on this Monday announced intentions to launch a task force with the Korea Tourism Organization aimed at attracting foreign visitors through South Korea's many festivals. The festivals in question are a total of 10, ranging from the Suwon Hwasong Cultural Festival to the Hwacheon Sancheoneo Ice Festival. The task force will seek diverse promotional strategies to create tourism packages linked to these festivals that are better tailored to foreign travelers. Also among these efforts is partnership with travel agencies to transform the appeal of these regional festivals into increased global tourism. Film director Park Chan-wook has been awarded the top rank of Commander of France's three-tier Order of Arts and Letters, the country's highest cultural honor. The award was announced by the French Culture Ministry during this year's Cannes Film Festival, where Park is serving as jury president. He becomes the fourth Korean recipient of the high honor, following the late stage director Kim Jong-wook in the year 2002, conductor Chung Myung-hoon in 2011, and soprano Cho Soo-mi in 2025. Meanwhile, here in South Korea, Culture Minister Choi Hee-young was quick to share his words of congratulations to Park, calling the achievement a proud moment that demonstrates the global status of Korea's arts and culture.
Many of you may be wondering how long the spell of unusually early summer heat will last. Starting tomorrow, increasing cloud cover will help ease daytime temperatures a bit. Then rain is expected nationwide between Wednesday and Thursday, which will bring temperatures back down to seasonal averages for this time of year. However, parts of the Gyeongsang-do provinces will remain hot tomorrow, with daytime highs climbing above 30 degrees Celsius. In the southern parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province, the heat index is expected to hover around 31 degrees. So make sure to stay hydrated and limit outdoor activities as much as possible during the hottest part of the day. Many areas will also see very high UV levels during the daytime tomorrow. Also, ozone concentrations are expected to rise as well, so please take care. Tomorrow's Seoul will start the day at 18 degrees, Chuncheon at 15 degrees, Busan at 18 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 27 degrees, Daejeon at 29 degrees, Daegu at 33 degrees. Looking ahead, on Wednesday, rain will spread across the country, bringing temperatures back down to seasonal averages.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us.
A country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping have reportedly agreed that the goal on the Korean peninsula is denuclearization. With more on Press Perspective today. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, May 18th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. During their recent summit in Beijing, the leaders of the U.S. and China confirmed their commitment to nuclear disarmament of North Korea. Now, this is according to the White House, and the confirmation follows earlier reports that North Korea has been mandated to launch a nuclear attack if its leader, Kim Jong-un, is assassinated. For more, I have Celio Fioretti with French daily Le Croix here in the studio. Celio, it's great to have you back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Professor Park Won-gon at Ewha Women's University joining this session virtually. Professor Park, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Celia, let's start here in the studio. Let's begin with reports then about North Korea's constitution ordering an automatic nuclear strike if its leader Kim Jong-un is assassinated.
Right. What is particularly striking in these reports is that North Korea appears to have formalized what analysts call a nuclear dead man switch. According to South Korea National Intelligence Service, Pyongyang recently revised its constitution to state that if Kim Jong-un is assassinated, or if North Korea nuclear command and control system is disabled, a nuclear strike would be launched automatically and immediately. In other words, the decision to retaliate to an attack no longer depends on Kim Jong-un himself, but the system is designed to ensure that a response will be launched no matter what, if the leadership is wiped out or in what we know as a decapitation strike. North Korea would still be able to respond according to that system. The purpose is fundamentally deterrence. North Korea has long accused the United States and South Korea to prepare plan to eliminate Kim Jong-un in an event of a conflict. And by embedding this principle in the constitution, Pyongyang is sending a very clear message that any attempt to kill its leader could trigger uncontrollable escalation of tension and nuclear response. Experts say that this decision is likely fueled by what happened in Iran, with U.S. and Israeli strikes decapitating the regime in the first day of the war. And Pyongyang seems to have sort of known that lesson, that it's not, it's a safeguard now to have unlimited retaliation, immediate retaliation under any circumstances. And that policy doesn't specify a specific target. It would likely be the U.S., South Korea, or even allies like Japan. But more broadly, this new change really show how strong the regime is determined to make the nuclear armament the cornerstone of its insurance policy for the regime.
Right. Professor Park, what more can you tell us about this concern within North Korea about the chances of an assassination attempt against its leader? I mean, do you believe the concern itself is warranted?
Well, first of all, I think the actual risk of an assassination attempt against Kim Jong-un right now is not particularly high, but that does not mean North Korea is not worried about it, and that's exactly why they changed their constitution. North Korea put it in writing that all nuclear authority rests solely with Kim Jong-un, and if something happens to him, that authority automatically transferred to a designated nuclear command body. Why would they do this? Well, both South Korea and the United States, likely, like pretty much every military in the world, have what we call the high-value target operation. Basically, in the early stage of the war, you try to take out of the enemy's top leadership. The idea is simple. If you remove the person giving the orders, you break their will and the ability to fight. And here is the thing. North Korea is extremely vulnerable to this kind of a strategy. This one-man system, everything revolves around Kim Jong-un. And if he's gone, honestly, the whole military command structure could just fall apart. Compare that to the democracy like South Korea or United States. Even if the president is killed, the system keeps running. The military keeps fighting. So North Korea knows this is their weak spot. And this constitutional change is essentially their way of saying, if you come after him, nukes fly automatically. It's deterrent, a way to protect him personally by making any attack on him unthinkable costly. In short, it's less about an imminent assassination threat and more about North Korea trying to shield Kim Jong-un by making him untouchable.
Right. And with regard to the regime's nuclear weapons, Celia, earlier this month, the regime defiantly defended its nuclear weapons ambitions on the international stage. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yes, earlier this month, the North Korean regime used the international stage at the United Nations to send a very blunt message. Its nuclear weapons are non-negotiable. Speaking at the review conference of the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, North Korea's ambassador to the UN, Kim Song, declared that Pyongyang Pyongyang will never again be bound by the treaty and that no outside pressure can alter its status as a nuclear armed state. This is significant because North Korea withdrew from the NPT back in 2003 and has since carried out 6 nuclear tests despite repeated United Nations Security Council sanction. And today, experts believe that the country possesses a dozen of nuclear warheads. And what Kim Song emphasized during that speech is that North Korea now considers its nuclear status as irreversible. He noted that this status is written directly in the constitution, along with principle governing how nuclear weapon can be used, as we just mentioned. And that means Pyongyang can no longer treat its arsenal as a bargaining chip in possible discussion with the U.S. or with South Korea, not even also as a token to exchange some relief on sanction. It is part of its army, part of its doctrine now. And the timing is also important with the international community focused on Iran nuclear ambition and broader question about nuclear deterrence. North Korea wanted to remind the world that it has no intention of following the same path that Iran did, which is talking and negotiation with the U.S. So the core message is really unmistakable. From Pyongyang perspective, North Korea is a nuclear armed state and will be so no matter what.
Right. Expanding on what Jacilio has said, Professor Park, there are analysts who believe that Mr. Trump's military campaign against Iran has worsened, if you will, the North Korea threat. Do you share this sentiment, Professor Park?
Well, that's really important question, and honestly, I think there are something to that argument. But let me break it down a little bit. First, on Trump's claim that North Korea came up during his talk with Xi Jinping, look, that's not surprising. Whenever U.S. and Chinese leaders meet, North Korea is almost always on the agenda. China is really the only country that has significant leverage over Pyongyang economically and diplomatically. So it makes sense that Trump would bring it up. But the key question is, what actually came out of those talks? Because we've been seeing this movie before. Leaders talk, but North Korea just keep doing what it does. Now, to your main question, does the U.S. military campaign against Iran actually make the North Korea threat worse? I think yes, in several important ways. Here's the core issue. Kim Jong-un is watching very carefully what happened to countries that don't have a nuclear weapon versus countries that do. He sees that Iran, a country without nuclear weapon, is being bombed. And meanwhile, nobody is launching military strike against North Korea, precisely because North Korea has nuclear weapons. That contrast is not lost on Kim Jong-un. If anything, it reinforces his belief that giving up his nuke would be suicidal. There is actually a historical parallel here that I think is really crucial. Think back year 2003, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya gave up his weapons of mass destruction program in deal with the West. He was praised internationally. And then 2011, he was overthrown and killed. North Korea watched that happen. And also Saddam Hussein in Iraq too. So from Kim Jong-un's perspective, the message from the Washington is almost the opposite what the U.S. intend. Instead of giving up your weapon, we will leave you alone. Kim read it as if you give up your weapon, you are finished. So, and that makes diplomacy incredibly difficult because the foundation of denuclearization deal is supposed to be give up your nuke and we'll guarantee your security. But U.S. military actions, whether in Iraq, Libya, or now Iran, keeps undermining that guarantee.
Right. Against that backdrop, Celia, there is quite a bit of debate over China's potential role in helping the broader international community re-engage with North Korea. What have you been hearing on the ground with regard to pundits' opinion about whether or not China would take an active role or a passive role with regard to engaging North Korea?
I would say China is likely to welcome any renewed diplomatic engagement with North Korea. But most analysts here in Seoul believe that Beijing will play probably a passive role in that regard, rather than launching a bold new initiative with North Korea. For China, the overriding priority is stability on the Korean Peninsula. Beijing does not want to see a military crisis, escalation, a collapse of the North Korean regime, or also a tightening of the the alliance between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan. In that sense, China still officially supports the denuclearization policy, but in practice, it has shifted to a more pragmatic approach. First, reduce any tension, and then deal with the nuclear issue later in the long term. Pundits say that China is not essentially, especially interested in dramatic diplomacy with big events with North Korea, like another summit, just for the sake of headlines. What matters to China more is whether talks can lower any risk of miscalculation and create mechanism to support that movement. So if Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un resume contact, China would probably support that, but quietly seeing it as more of a useful tool for any crisis management in the region. At the same time, China is rebuilding its ties with Pyongyang after several years of relative distance between the two. Trade is starting all over again. Broader infrastructures also are being upgraded, and high-level exchanges have resumed between the two countries. So Beijing wants to ensure that North Korea doesn't only deal with Russia now that they're both allies. China still wants to have a word to say in the relationship. So the consensus among experts is that China will remain engaged, but more passive, more quiet, but still working hard, let's say, in the shadows.
Right, and staying with Chinese diplomacy, Professor Park, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is scheduled to host his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin tomorrow, that's Tuesday, for talks in Beijing. What do you believe will dominate their discussions? And I wonder, are the latest developments on the geopolitical front bolstering perhaps Beijing's presence on the global diplomatic stage?
Well, I think there are three big themes. First, they are going to talk about Ukraine. The war is now well into fourth year, and there's growing international pressure and to move towards some kind of a ceasefire or negotiate settlement. And Xi Jinping has positioned himself as potential mediator, and Putin needs to know exactly where China stands. Does Beijing fully back Moscow? Does it have its own peace agenda? These two leaders need to get on the same page, because right now the end game in Ukraine is genuinely uncertain. And second, economics and trade. Russia is under massive Western sanctions, and China has essentially become Russia's economic lifeline. Energy deals, yuan ruble trade, technological transfer, all of this will be on the table. Putin needs China more than ever economically, and Xi Jinping knows that. So expect some significant bilateral agreement to come out of this meeting. Third, the broader geopolitical message, and this is where I think it gets really interesting. This meeting is not just a bilateral issue. It's about signaling to Washington and to the world that there is an alternative power bloc that is not going away. After Trump's visit to China, where trade and Taiwan and North Korea well discussed, Putin showing up in Beijing sent a clear message. China is not simply pivoting toward the West. It's maintaining its strategic partnership with Russia simultaneously. But the real question here is that whether this translated into actual influence or whether it's just mostly optics, because managing a relationship with Trump's Washington while maintaining a partnership with Putin's Moscow at the same time is an extraordinary, difficult balancing act.
Right, and while Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin sit down in Beijing tomorrow, President Lee Jae-myung and his Japanese counterpart Sanai Takaichi will sit down in Andong also tomorrow. What has been shared about the agenda with regard to President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi?
Indeed, President Lee Jae-myung and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi are expected to use their meeting in Andong to reinforce what both governments are describing as a more mature and stable relationship between the two countries. This will be their sixth summit since Lee Jae-myung took office last year, which itself is quite significant of how the relationship is going. It reflects the continuation of a so-called shuttle diplomacy between the two countries, with leaders meeting regularly, even when there's no immediate event or crisis to resolve. In terms of substance, the officials have not released a detailed agenda, but from what have been said, the discussion are expected to focus on strengthening bilateral cooperation amid what both sides describe as a rapidly changing international landscape. that include regional security concerns, such as North Korea, of course, also coordination with the United States, and broader economic and strategic issue in East Asia. We know now with the energy crisis and the trade order being reorganized, these both countries, which are exporting countries, need to know how to adopt a strategy with navigating through tariff and disruption of supply lines. And just as important is the symbolism also of that meeting. The summit is taking place in Andong, which is the hometown of President Lee Jae-myung, and Sanae Takeshi will receive a treatment similar to what Lee Jae-myung had when he visited Nara, which is the hometown in Japan of Prime Minister Sanae Takaishi. And this event also will have an elaborate welcome ceremony, a joint dinner, a cultural event at the Hawaii Full Cultural Village. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it is really meant to show the personal relationship between the two leaders. And so while the precise policy agenda remains quite broad, the overall goal is clear: to continue to reinforce that relationship and make it personal between Japan and Korea.
Right. Professor Park, there are quite a number of pundits who believe that the Trump administration's foreign policy is actually pushing its traditional allies to bond amid doubt over the reliability of the U.S. as a partner. What are your thoughts?
Well, yes, I think this concern is very real, and frankly, it's growing among U.S. allies, and for good reason. Let me start with what happened at the recent Trump-Xi Jinping summit on Taiwan. Since 1982, the United States has maintained a firm principle: arms sales to Taiwan are simply not up for discussion with China. But Trump essentially broke with that principle by bringing it up with Xi Jinping. It sent a deeply unsettling message. If Washington is willing to put Taiwan's defense on the negotiation table with Beijing, what else might be up for grabs? Could South Korea defense arrangement be quietly discussed with Pyongyang? Could Japan's security commitment be traded away in some broader deal? Once you break that principle, allies start asking very uncomfortable questions. And for South Korea specifically, this hits particularly close to home. South Korea does not have any nuclear weapons, so it relies entirely on U.S. extended deterrence, basically America's nuclear umbrella, to counter the North Korean threats. If there is even a hint that Trump might cut a deal with Kim Jong-un without fully consulting Seoul, that is an existential concern for South Korea. And given what we just saw with Taiwan, that scenario is no longer unthinkable. But beyond any single issue, there is a broader pattern here that worries allies. Trump fundamentally sees alliance in transactional terms as a cost, not a strategic asset. That mindset naturally weakens the overall credibility of U.S. defense commitment. And then there is a national defense strategy that came out this past January, which made this even more explicit. It shifted away from the traditional U.S. posture of taking primary responsibility for defending allies, and instead emphasized what it called critical but limited support, essentially telling allies, you need to take the lead in your own defense. We will help, but don't count on us to carry the burden. That is significant departure from decade of U.S. alliance policy. So put it all together, the Taiwan episode, the transactional approach to alliance, and the new defense strategy, and you can see why allies are genuinely anxious.
Right, which is, of course, the thought shared by quite a number of analysts here in the country and, of course, in Europe as well. Professor Park, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
And Celia here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching. Do join us again same time tomorrow.